Well, here we go, everyone. Trump tacoed on the 50% tariffs, just like everyone expected. And that right there is the entire trade war in one sentence, isn't it? Donald Trump's $28 billion hammer was supposed to land on Canadian goods today at 12:01 a.m. Well, guess what? They didn't. He yanked it back 2 hours before impact, and then he stood up and called the whole thing a deal. No paper, no signature, just a victory lap with nothing underneath it.
He's such an idiot, he doesn't even realize that his own words give the whole thing away. Subject to finalization of documents. Newsflash, Donnie, you don't need paperwork for a done deal. You need paperwork when the deal doesn't exist yet and you're praying nobody asks to see it.
He has spent weeks touting this as the big one, the 50% tariff that finally brought Canada to its knees. But Ottawa didn't bend. Ottawa didn't even flinch.
So here's the part that actually tells you everything, because the two sides can't even agree on what yesterday was. The White House is out there saying, deal, all caps, exclamation point. Prime Minister Mark Carney, by contrast, says there's been substantial progress. But, and this is the phrase to remember, important work is still to be done.
So one side is playing to his base and taking a victory lap, and the other side is saying we haven't even crossed the line yet. Only one of those people is telling the truth, and we all know who that is.
And look, Dave, I get why the White House needs this to be a deal. If it's a deal, Trump won. If it's a deal, he didn't just fold in front of the whole world. But here's the thing in Washington that nobody wants to admit. We've all seen this movie before, again and again. Just take a look at Iran for one. We have a deal. The deal is postponed. Oh, wait, we have a deal. Nope, it's postponed again. Oh, we have peace. Nope, the war's back on. You get the picture.
So here's the thing I can't get past, Deb, because the two statements from these men released on the same day tell you the whole fight just in one glance. Trump's reads like a campaign poster stapled to a press release. I've paused the 50% tariffs against Canada. Have a deal. The great Keystone XL pipeline may be awoken from the grave. And the man signed his own name in caps at the bottom. I still don't understand why he does that.
Even Sleepy Joe Biden gets a name check in a statement that's supposed to be about trade with Canada. He can't talk about a deal without first settling old scores in his own crazy little brain.
And then there's the Keystone XL pipeline. That got dropped into Trump's post like some guy at a party nobody even remembers inviting. Is it part of the deal? Is it a distraction? Now, set Prime Minister Carney's statement next to it. No exclamation marks, no victory lap, one calm paragraph about Canadian businesses, workers, farmers, and families. Read it slowly, and you'll notice that the man never once says I. He says Canada.
And then there's the line that should make Washington's eardrums burn. And I want every Canadian to actually hear it. While we continue this work, Canada remains focused on building a stronger, more independent, and more competitive economy at home.
Independent. There it is, right there. That's not the word you drop about an ally you're planning to crawl back to. That's a country quietly describing the exit. What's happening here is that one man is selling a deal and the other is building an alternative to it.
And you know what I love about all this? Prime Minister Carney isn't even being coy about it anymore. More independent, not more friendly, not a better neighbor. Independent.
And that's what rattles them the most there, Deb. A man who shouts about his victory is negotiating for a headline. A man who calmly says we're building a more independent economy, he's already moved on. Sure, the negotiation is still open, but the decision, it was made a long time ago.
Definitely. Now, let's talk about what's on the table, because this is where the so-called deal gets very thin. Washington wants dairy. Washington wants the alcohol ban gone. Washington wants autos, broader market access, economic security, a digital trade chapter. And that is a very full shopping list. But you know what? Canada hasn't agreed to a single line of it.
Right. Discussing a concession is not making one. There's a big difference between talking about selling your house and actually handing over the keys. Trump is out there describing the open house like the closing has already happened.
Yeah, especially when some of the things that Trump keeps writing about are not even on Prime Minister Carney's shoulders to give. American booze was removed from the shelves by provincial governments. Sure, Ottawa can negotiate around it and it can encourage the premiers, but the provinces control their own liquor systems. So, Mark Carney cannot simply walk into a room, promise Trump that every bottle of American bourbon will be back on the shelves by Saturday, and expect the country to salute. It doesn't work that way, Donnie. And maybe 10 minutes of research on how our political system actually works would do both Greer and Trump a world of good. But we know neither of them will read anything.
No. And we all know several premiers have already made their position pretty clear here. If Canada gives something back, then they want something meaningful in return. You don't get something for nothing here. And this is the beautiful irony of the whole mess, isn't it? Because the one demand Trump keeps hammering, put that booze back, is the exact thing that proves the ban is working. You don't negotiate to reverse something that's harmless. You negotiate to reverse the thing that's bleeding you dry.
And the numbers say it clearly. American spirits exports to Canada are down 70%. Wine is down 77%. Jack Daniel's parent company watched Canadian sales drop 60% last year. For a country that only has a tenth of the population of the USA, we're certainly doing a lot of damage.
So when Trump says open the shelves, what he's actually saying is my poll numbers are hurting and I need you to make it stop so I can win the midterms.
The man who told us tariffs are beautiful and easy to win is now begging for his bourbon back.
Then there's the autos, and this is the one that should actually worry working Canadians the most because Trump's compromise is a discount on a beating. They floated cutting auto tariffs from 25% down to 15%. We covered that. And they're selling it like they just did Canada a favor.
A year ago, that tariff didn't even exist. American buyers paid less, Canadian plants ran full, and nobody in the White House was threatening to tax a car built in Oshawa.
And the fine print is where it turns into pure bullshit. They'll trim the number only if the car is American enough. As if a vehicle assembled in Windsor from parts that crossed the border half a dozen times before the doors even went on suddenly becomes foreign the moment they just don't like the math.
Listen, Trump, you can't draw a line on a map and unbuild a supply chain that's been crossing that line for 30 years. The sticker says assembled in Canada, but the value in that car is a joint account. It's Michigan steel, Ontario assembly, Mexican wiring. They've all been cashing the same paychecks for decades now, and it's been working. But now Trump's pretending that he can just pull it apart.
And here's who actually eats that 15% if it comes into effect. It lands on the plant floor in Windsor and Oakville. Lines that have been running competitive for decades, and now every vehicle that rolls off carries a border penalty because North American somehow no longer means what it meant last year.
And the American side doesn't get spared either. The dealership in Ohio and the parts counter in Detroit, they're not paying a Canadian tax. They're paying a Trump tax on a car that used to be called domestic. Both ends of the border lose, and the only guy smiling is Trump and his billionaire dudes holding the calculator. A tariff tax is a tax, and this one's getting collected from both ends of the border while Washington calls it leverage.
Prime Minister Carney has said from day one that he won't sign a bad deal. And through the whole final weekend, the call with Trump, the negotiators in the room, the clock all ticking down, Ottawa held the line.
And this is where it turns because everyone's asking the wrong question. They're asking, did Canada win? That's the wrong question. Canada didn't need to win anything yesterday. It just needed to not lose. Say no long enough, And Washington has to decide whether the fight is worth the cost.
And you know what? Washington decided it wasn't. Well, not today, anyway. The White House moved its own deadline. Read that again. That says a lot. Trump created the deadline, then moved the deadline, then claimed moving it was a victory.
Last March, steel and aluminum tariffs. They were announced and then they were pulled. This past winter, more deadlines and then more exemptions. Every final, absolute, non-negotiable line from Trump turns out to be written in a crayon.
Listen, Wall Street noticed it months ago. That's the entire joke behind Taco Tuesday. They don't even price in the threat anymore because they've watched it fold way too many times. The market just waits, shrugs, and then checks the calendar.
A threat only works if people believe you use it. The second you know it won't, the pistol has no bullets. You're just a guy pointing your finger and making pew 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 noises at a trade block. Pew pew
Pew pew. That's good. Good noises. And here's the part the Mango Mussolini keeps missing. This pressure was supposed to run one way, right? America squeezes, Canada caves. But it turns out that trade runs in both directions. And so does the pain. Mark Carney is playing a longer game. Every tariff threat pushes Canada one more step towards selling to Europe, to Asia, to anywhere that isn't the United States. The threat itself is teaching Canada to need the US a little less every single day. So let's wrap this all up. Yesterday, the biggest tariff threat of this entire fight was supposed to land, and it didn't. There's no signed deal, there's no document, there's just a man who promised a hammer, and Canada got a rain check.
Looks like another Taco Tuesday to me. Taco night tonight, Dave. Trump blinked, Carney didn't, and the only thing that moved was a calendar.
So Friday is coming though, and here's what I want you guys watching for. The actual terms. Autos, steel, lumber, dairy, the booze, and whether Keystone somehow sneaks its way back into this deal. That's where we find out if this is a real agreement or just more deadline theater.
So let us know in the comments, and while you're down there, check out the pinned comment for our merch store, our Substack, the A-Team, and our Facebook page.
And don't forget to give this a like, a hype, and a share so other people can watch Trump Taco yet again.
Thanks for all your support, everybody, and we'll see you tomorrow, same time, same place.
Ciao for now.